Hi guys, my name is Evgenia. This vlog is about Russia. Today I talked to Sean Thomas, RT anchor and correspondent. He has lived in Russia for about 9 years, so he has a lot to tell us about his life here. Continue watching. Now, what was your first impression of Russia? Do you remember it? And has it changed?
Oh yeah.
Your understanding of Russia?
Yes, it's changed a lot. Okay, so when I first got to Russia, it was in the summer 2009, and I landed, and there was a guy at the airport, and it had the little RT sign, and it said Thomas. And many people in Russia, because I have 3 first names, Sean, Michael, Thomas, and Thomas is my family name. So everybody calls me Thomas, which is, I've gotten really used to this, but so he didn't speak any English, no English whatsoever. And so the driver, we get my luggage, he takes me in the car to the hotel, and the hotel didn't have a proper reservation for me. And so the driver starts arguing with the lady at the desk, and the lady at the desk is yelling at the driver, and she calls her boss, and he calls someone from RT, and then they are screaming at each other, and finally she's just like, fine, whatever. And she hands me this number, and the driver leaves, and so I don't know what to do. So I'm told that I have to go to a certain floor. No one speaks English. And the hotel was this hotel where you go up to the certain floor, and then a lady on that floor gives you the key to the actual room, and which is a system that I've never been familiar with. And when I was at the airport, I had changed money, and I only had 1,000 rubles. And we'd gotten to the hotel late at night, and so I get into my room, and I'm really hungry. And I go out onto the street, and on the street there's like a little kiosk for Star Dogs, and like there's a little kiosk for like some place for beer and a little kiosk. So I go up to the place for Star Dogs, and I'm like, "Can you help me, please?" Niet. And I'm like, "Wait, but I'm really hungry. Like I don't speak any Russian. I just want a hot dog." And niet, because Star Dogs at the time was like 35 rubles, and I had 1,000 rubles, and so like they didn't want to change the money, and I didn't understand what was going on. So I went across to a different kiosk, and I showed them my 1,000 rubles, and I pointed at like a Coke, and they're like, "Niet." And so I then saw a police officer, and I'm like, "Oh, he can help me. Oh, this is going to be wonderful." And so I said, "Hey, is there any way that you can help me?" And he said, "Niet," and he pointed at the hotel, like, "Go back to the hotel." So finally the hotel lady, she yelled at me for a little bit, and gave me like 500 and then 5 100s, and then I went back out to Star Dogs with 100, and then the lady just looked at me and rolled her eyes, and she then starts asking me what I want. Well, I don't know what I want because I don't speak Russian. I'm just pointing, and she's really angry with me, and so finally she just gave me something. And I ended up having a beer and a hot dog as my first welcoming meal from Star Dogs, of all places. And then, so that was my welcome into Russia. Like really, like, ta-da, you're here. And then, but since then, everything has gotten a lot better in terms of like customer service. When I first moved here, customer service was not a very well-known concept, and now it's kind of gotten better. And yeah, so like I would go to a produkti back when they existed, like the little small produktis, and I'd walk in and they'd say, "Speak," but and I'd be like, what? And then if I didn't know exactly what I wanted, they'd be like, ugh, and then they'd go to the next person. So you had to learn exactly what you wanted real quick, and then so things are different now.
I know it is a very popular question about stereotypes, but still, can you remember any stereotypes that you find totally wrong about Russia?
Only Russians think that Americans think that there are bears in the streets of Russia. Because Americans don't think this. Like, it's true. Like no American is like, "Oh, Russia, how many bears do you see every?" Like, no, this doesn't. And there's actually a true story behind that, and someday we can talk about the true story behind the bears in Russia, but that's a different story for a different time. So yeah, that's. I do find there's a difference in generations. So in the older generation and in some of the smaller towns, like as a journalist, I found that the older generation didn't trust you unless you actually had a toast and drank vodka with them. That's not so much true with the younger generation. Balalaika and that's not. I mean, no. So yeah, those are the typical Russian stereotypes that you think that when you think of Russia.
Did you have a chance to listen to Balalaika?
Yeah, I did. I have before. So I've been very lucky. Early on, when I first moved to Russia, I traveled all around the country. So I'm very familiar with the idea that there's Moscow and St. Petersburg, and then there's Russia. And I know the differences very well. And there are big differences between Russia and Moscow and Russia and St. Petersburg. And some of those traditions, and I would say traditions and not stereotypes, some of those traditions are stronger in the smaller villages, in the smaller areas. But the stereotypes of like the mean, nasty Russian, the Russian mafia, that doesn't exist. Or the one thing that I do think, if you want to make anyone laugh when they talk about, вы говорите по-английски, and they're like, oh, no, чуть-чуть. And you say, London is the capital of Great Britain in Northern Ireland. Because this accent, that's a stereotypical thing, but it's something that actually comes from something that's true and something that's real. So, but yeah, no balalaika, no bears.
But can you remember something what surprised you in positive way?
Oh, in positive way. Well, yeah, like everyone talks about how cold and like the Russian people are, like the Moscow metro. I don't think that that's true at all. Like, so yeah, the first time you meet someone, they're very, I would say, professional, and but once they know you and once they trust you, the majority of Russians are just warm, friendly, kind. They'll give you their best food, their best place to stay. Like, they're just generous, really generous people. And early on, when I first got here, I was on an assignment down in the Caucasus region, like Stavropol, maybe Pyatigorsk, and this little small town. The mayor of this little small town had this dinner to honor the RT crew and to honor us, and they did the traditional, the toast, and the very first toast was to friendship, and to think that 20 years ago this couldn't happen. This was a closed area, and now here you are, an American, sitting in our presence, and this is to new relationships and to new friendships. And then everyone went around the table to make a toast, and then by the end of it's like, to the color red, because red reminds me of love, and I love my wife, and give me a kiss, and like it was, so everybody was just having a good time. And so what I found is that once people here trust you and have like a good relationship with you, that they're just warm, friendly, and wonderful.
I know that you lived in East for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
So in your opinion, does Russia belong more to East or to West?
The answer is yes. Russia belongs both ways. That's why you have the eagle facing two ways, right? You have one facing to the east and one facing to the west. This is the symbol of Russia. Russia does not exist without both. And the east and the west does not exist without Russia holding it all together. So I think Russia plays an important part in holding the east and the west together and keeping the east and the west apart. I know that sounds really crazy, but and then if you ask a Russian, if you say like, oh, so are you part of Europe or are you part of Asia? They're like, we're Russia. So Russia is its own unique and very important thing in the world.
And talking about Russian mentality and maybe American mentality, do you see any similarities, maybe differences?
Yeah, Russians and Americans are very much alike. Both are very prideful of their countries. Both are very innovative in different ways, but both take pride in their sciences. Both take pride in the achievements that they've made in the world. Very competitive, happy. What I have found is that Russia and the United States, the people are more similar than they are different in general. And I mean, on a bigger human scale, you could say that humans around the world all want the same things. They all want to have, a roof over their head. They all want to have love in their lives. They all want to eat. But more than that, Russians and Americans share similarities because for so long they were pitted against each other. Like you had the Soviet Union and you had the United States, right? And they were competitors and competitors and competitors.
That competition made them
more similar. I know that sounds crazy, but I really think that that's pretty true. I mean, they both made it to space. They both, have nuclear weapons. They both have great navies. They both have great military. They both have great sports teams. I mean, it's the similarities are amazing.
Relations between men and women in Russia and America. Is there any difference which you find?
No. And there are positives and negatives to both. I am not a fan of how I see men treating women in Russia. But that's because, I was raised by, my father died when I was young, and so I was raised by a single woman. And so, I was always taught to respect women and to treat them as equals. And that's not something that I see a lot of in Russia. That's one stereotype, that, like the macho Russian man, that's something that I do see that does exist in Russia that is interesting. But also, the idea of equal rights and feminism in Russia is a bit different. That, the Russian woman, from my experience, and I could be offensive if I say this, but this is what I've seen, knows that they deserve to be treated well and demands that they're treated well. And I've actually known women who have said, if they don't show up with flowers, then they don't get a second date, or because I'm beautiful and they need to treat me like I'm beautiful. But at the same time, they also, the younger generation is embracing more of an equal, more of, I don't know, it's a really difficult question, because I think in some ways Russia is still kind of trying to find this new attitude of what feminism is, or what the role of the woman is versus the man. And so there's just a very big difference between how generations of women treat themselves in the United States and here in Russia, if that makes any sense. I know I'm rambling, but it's a very difficult question to answer. One thing I do know is that, in the Soviet era, the idea of equal work and equal pay wasn't an issue, because the women worked and then they came home and they also took care of the family. Mm-hmm. So the women worked 4 times as hard as the men. And so, the scariest thing in the universe is a Russian babushka, because they don't take any crap from anybody. If you meet a Russian babushka on the street and you say something that makes her just a little bit, she'll let you know Exactly, which I don't think you'll find that strong of an attitude in the United States in terms of women speaking their mind. But like when it comes to dating, like it's a bizarre, completely different world between attitudes of like Russian women here and women in the United States.
Are there any Russian dishes which you like most?
Борщ, пельмени, except there's no such thing as a real Russian dish, is there? Like, so pelmeni comes from China, shashlik comes from the Caucasus, and from, borscht comes from Ukraine. Maybe she is like a real Russian thing. Vodka comes from Poland. But the same thing with American food. This is another similarity between the United States and Russia, is that like American food comes from everywhere. But every country in the entire world borders Russia because it's so big, so like the food comes from everywhere. So yeah. Blini. Of course I like blini because, I mean, come on, pancakes. So tasty. Yeah, I like Russian food. It's tasty.
And селедка под шубой.
Что это?
Не знаете, селедка под шубой? It's herring under the clothes.
Oh no, yeah, not a fan. Oh, and that meat jelly,
Холодец.
no, not a fan.